everyone, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. Today, it's my absolute pleasure to have Jon Mowat with us. Jon is a fantastic author, consultant, and he's the MD of a specialist video marketing agency, so really knows his stuff. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, video marketing, the psychology of it. It's a huge area right now, and really understanding how it works and how to create video that's compelling and is going to resonate with people is an art form and a science. So we're going to go through that over the next 20 minutes or so. So welcome, Jon.
Thank you very much for having me. Great introduction. Love that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Let's kick off with a little bit about you. I mean, your video is a huge area, and you really need to know your stuff when you're doing it, when you're running an agency like you are, right? When you're working with so many clients to produce such a broad set of videos. So, just tell me a little bit about you to start off with. What's your background? How did you get into this?
Yeah, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I talking about this? That sort of stuff.
Exactly.
So I started off with the BBC. So I was a classic publisher for about 10 years. Did BBC One documentaries, network documentaries, travelled the world. My 20s and 30s were great fun. Got some good war stories from that. But then started Hurricane in the same year as YouTube started. Sorry. So, very much a YouTube native. We've been going like 16 years now. And over time, we moved from being a video production company to being a video marketing agency, which is a very different thing. But as video's grown up, it's become more sophisticated. It's not just making stuff, it's thinking about it. And then I've written a couple of books, the most recent one called Video Marketing. And as you said, I work as a consultant with people. So, very much live and breathe. How on earth do we harness this beast that is video for brand?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's huge. I mean, as you say, starting with YouTube, which of course is still today one of the biggest social media sites and search engines simultaneously. Of course, video has taken off so much in relatively recent years because of TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, as well as obviously everywhere else and on-site video. And there's a temptation to just knock out a load of video, but the difference, as you just said there, right, as being you started out from a production perspective and moved into video marketing. I think let's just start there. What is video marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the joy of having written a book on it is you do get to define it because it's a really, really new field, right? If you even 3 years ago, or edition 1 of the book, it was called video strategy, or it was video marketing strategy. It's like it's a new thing, but fundamentally, video marketing it's not just making a film. It's using data to give you the insights to create content, multiple pieces of content across multiple channels to multiple audiences. So that's kind of it defined. It's data driven. It's multiple audiences, multiple places. But then it's actually more about that. It's understanding where you are in the sales funnel, and it's applying marketing thinking to video production. So typically, you go to a production agency, they'll go, "Oh, this will look pretty. We'll get a person on a bike." Whereas we'll be like, "Well, what are you trying to say? What are your end goals, KPIs, metrics, all that sort of stuff?" So that's the difference. And I think for brands, the video marketing side of things is where it's really interesting. People have got this expertise, like they understand their brand, they understand their marketing, but like, how do I bolt this quite expensive tool into the toolkit without screwing it up? And that's where we come in. Good.
Yeah, very nice. So yeah, I think video, it's pretty clear these days that video is an important part of a strategy. I see a lot of brands really going at it. I see a lot of other brands probably not putting enough effort into it. And I see others doing what you're saying there, sort of fairly directionless, sort of box ticking, right? We need some videos, so let's make sure we've got some videos. But I suppose it'd be great for people to understand why video really matters, right? I mean, how can brands use video to grow? So beyond just let's make sure we've got some videos, or let's run a campaign, or let's make sure we've got this nice brand video we can have on the homepage. But genuinely, why does video matter, and how can you use it in a really compelling way? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I've got loads of thoughts. It's which ones I put. It's which ones I put first, right? So that question, like, okay, I want a video. How do I use it? I think the really important stuff is to understand, like, that video can be used across the sales funnel, and it's not, it's you've got that classic sort of V-shaped sales funnel that people talk about, and I don't think it's that shape anymore. And we can talk later about what shape the digital marketing funnel is and all that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, if you have an awareness problem, you're going to be doing short, punchy videos at the top, putting paid behind it, putting search behind it. So that's a great tool there. But if you're in the middle of the sales funnel, it's going to start driving conversations, driving engagement rates, dwell times, all that sort of stuff. But then if you're at the bottom of the funnel, it will help you activate discount codes and all those kind of things. So it's like, it's really useful wherever you are. So it's not just a case of making stuff. It's like what we're doing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it's a great point. The number of ways you can use video to move people down a funnel is a really interesting conversation, and one I don't have enough. I think most people are talking about videos where they can create some level of awareness, build some followers, reposition their brand in some way, but actually using video to do the one thing we're all trying to do in marketing ultimately, which is solve problems. Is a really powerful thing. If someone's going through a journey and you think there are questions they may have, and you talked about data earlier, you're understanding the data points you might bring in, you might witness, you might see, you might test, and understanding therefore what problems people are facing, and using video snippets to sort of answer those questions within that funnel, and therefore keep them moving through the conversion journey, I think is a really interesting tool, rather than just sort of tool tips and help and signposting. I think contextual video can really bring that to life. I mean, what do you think about that?
I can give you an example of how it works. Yeah, I'm just sort of pulling it together. But fundamentally, like, I've got a T5, a Volkswagen camper van, and I've got two kids, and we wanted to go, and we used to go away in the van quite a bit. But as they got bigger, it was like they don't fit in the van anymore. And I was thinking, like, how am I going to keep doing this? How am I going to keep going with the van? And then suddenly on Facebook, I get this video of this kind of, it's super cool, right? It's this thing that goes on top of the van, and it's like a pop-up tent thing. And it was just a paid ad. And as soon as I got that paid ad, I was visualizing myself, sort of traveling across the south of France with the kids and all this kind of stuff. So, they got me with that. But then it was like, well, I want one of those. Let me just have a look at what it's looked like. Click through to Instagram, loads of cool videos of this thing, like lifestyle-y stuff. And then from there, it was like, well, it's $3,000, this thing. So I'm not just going to, spend £3,000 on this thing randomly. So I went onto YouTube, I looked at the heritage, and they had loads of cool videos like, how does it stand up in high wind? How was it designed? What's it made out of? So then it was like, okay, I want one of those. And then it sort of answered all my mid-funnel sales problems. And then this is where they really got me. It was like, I wanted one. And then they got me with an email, or video rather, around the fact it was a Kickstarter. And I had to, bid to get one of these things. And if I didn't bid, then it wasn't going to happen. And actually they did such a good set of content that they needed, well, firstly, I was the second person in the world to bid on one of these things because I was super keen by that point. Right. They needed $500,000 to get this thing off the ground. And in 2 days, they got nearly $3 million because they told this story so well. So, now I've got one of these things called an iCamper. It sits on top of the van. And then in my email later, I get another video to this other thing you can add as an accessory. So it's like, if you look at the retention journey of that journey, they got me on Facebook with a video. They answered my questions on YouTube. They drove me to action with a Kickstarter, and they used email video to make me buy more. I mean, it's like, that's surely what we're trying to do, right?
Boom. Yeah, that's a fantastic, compelling journey. And I hope you're making use of all of that now as well.
I am, yeah. Well, the kids are so old now, they refuse to be in it together because they hate each other. But it's, classic 15-year-old and 12-year-old. So they're just like not doing it. But
it's to buy them one each.
Buy them one each. Well, to be honest, they just, they want a luxury resort now, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
But, it's video marketing is about that journey.
Yeah,
and it might be that you need to run a YouTube channel to get awareness, or it might be you need to do a brand film. But breaking it down into sections and viewing each thing as a step is super, super important. Yeah,
I think that's a really great point. In terms of beyond the sort of the sales funnel, just a quick touch on how technology's changed it. You said you really started getting into this when YouTube started. 2005?
2005, 2006, I think. Yeah, that was when it was. Right? I mean, it's mental, isn't it?
Yeah, long time ago now, ancient history. But since then, of course, with smartphones obviously following shortly after that, and social media at the same time, that's obviously revolutionized everything. And now with TikTok being where it is, the work you're doing, do you find that there's more focus now on short video, and do you think that's right or wrong, or do you think people are still trying to create really immersive video experiences? I mean, just a sort of a quick look at just what you're seeing day to day. If you were talking to a brand, would you be thinking, I need to steer them properly on a lot of short video content, or we've really got to focus on sort of meaningful, immersive brand content? Or would you have any thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, when I do a conference, you always get the question like, how long should my videos be? And
right.
I go, right, I've got the definitive answer. It needs to be between 8 seconds and 2 hours. And you can see the whole room just go, oh, Christ, because it's like, it depends on where, again, without banging on about sales funnel, it depends on where you are. Yeah. Grabbing attention, answering questions, super, super short. But if you're an engineer spending £1 million on a piece of hardware, you want to watch a 2-hour white paper, you want to watch a webinar, you want to watch a podcast, you want to watch all that deep stuff. So, yes, technology and this kind of idea that attention span has diminished, even though I'd argue that it hasn't, has driven films shorter. And what we are finding is it's just got more complex, right? Instead of going, I remember the days we used to send a 16:9 film on DVD, but now you're looking at a 1:1, a 5:4, a 16:9, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. We now have a delivery pack, which is probably around 12 assets per language or region. So it's just more. It's more like all of these beasts need feeding. And then the client goes, I want TikTok. And you're like, okay, that's a whole... that's a whole other thing. It's got to be native to TikTok. It's got to feel realistic. It's got to feel authentic. So I think the answer is technology has made the landscape more complex. That's what's happened. But you just have to be aware of the nuances.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I think you're absolutely right. There isn't a one size fits all. You don't just say, hey, look, we're going to do 2-hour videos on YouTube and that's going to be our video strategy. That's not the world that we live in. Absolutely right. So I think it's an interesting space, and I get the same questions from my clients all the time. Exactly that question of how long should my video be, right? And the answer is, what are we trying to solve, and who are we trying to solve it for? If we work that out, then we can figure out the answer to that question. If this is a really complex problem that people need to do good research on and understand, then it probably is a 45-minute video, and that's okay. And maybe we need some samples of that to promote it on social media, and that's okay as well. Or maybe you can just very quickly make the point to a brief degree for 20 seconds, and then that'll hook them into the longer video. And there's answers to it in so many different ways, which no one likes, right? No one likes you to answer it much in that way. But that's
they want a definitive. I mean, there is one thing I can say, which is like, and we'll talk about this later if we talk about sort of compelling stories and things, but less is more, absolutely less is more. So however long it is, if you can make it shorter, it's probably going to be better. So, and there's a really good piece of analysis done by Wistia. They looked at like 7,000 films, and they ran a film like 7,000 times. They had a couple of films. One was 30 seconds long, one was 60 seconds long, and they just looked at the engagement rates. And they found that the 60-second dropped off quite quickly, and only about 20% of the audience got to the end. The 30-second one, a lot more people stayed a lot further into the film. But the interesting thing was the first 30 seconds of these two films was exactly the same. So the 60-second just had extra stuff at the end. So why were people dropping off at a different rate? Why were people dropping off quicker when it was longer? Because they're just looking at the play bar. They go, no, it's 60 seconds. I can't be bothered to stick with it. Whereas when it's short, they will just stay with it so you get more audience. So less is more. You have to decide, do we say everything to not many people, or not as much, but to everyone? Those are the two things you have to balance out.
Yeah, that's right. It's like the old advertising approach, hook them in with a short message and then explain the rest once you've got them hooked in, right? Otherwise you won't hook them in the first place. And the old copywriting technique as well, read it through, cut it, then cut it again, then cut it again, and then you'll be roughly close to where you want to be. So,
it's storytelling at the end of the day, isn't it? It's a new way of telling the story, but it's, people get, they get kind of excited about the video medium, but it is just compelling stories.
It is about telling stories, and I was saying that to someone yesterday that life is really just about telling stories, right? I mean, you go back through history, and most people got to where they were. Politicians, often kings, and you name it, right? The people that are here are the ones that are the ones we remember, the ones that have told the most compelling stories often, and that's what life's all about. It's certainly what
It's an
marketing's all
amazing
about.
evolutionary theory that the storytelling is so ingrained into us, because when we sat around the campfire telling stories of where to go, where not to go, it was actually the best storytellers with the most compelling use of narrative who were the rock stars of the day. So if you can imagine sort of a Bono sort of figure stood by this kind of fireplace telling stories, they would have had probably the choice of mates. They would have been able to lead the group into battle. They would have been able to lead the group into missions. So it was they were more likely to be the leader of that crew because they could communicate those things. So it's exactly what you're saying is hardwired into us at an evolutionary level that we communicate through story.
Yeah, that's right. And we follow the best stories. That's absolutely right. I mean, let's talk a little bit about stories. I mean, if you're going to create a really compelling video, you need a compelling story. But how do you do that? What's involved when you sit down with a blank piece of paper and you think, okay, look, I need to tell someone about this specific thing. How do I tell that in a really compelling way? Where do you start?
I'm just trying to decide where to start my own story. You know, I think it's firstly kind of understanding, like, I think the most important thing with stories is what happens when we see a good one, you know, or when we hear a good one. So when you start to hear a story and you hear a story if two people tell each other a story, the person telling it, their brainwaves will change, and so will the person hearing it. And when they've done scans on it, and actually the brainwaves start to become in tune. So like you start to connect at sort of very close level. When you start hearing a good story, what happens is your brainwaves change. The chemicals that cause emotion, they kick in, they kind of hijack your cortex and stuff, and you stop making such sort of sensible decisions. And instead, your hippocampus kicks in because you've got to remember stuff. If you think about like why we communicate, where to go and catch things or farm things or gather berries, your language centers kick in, your vasopressin, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, all these things kick in when you start hearing a story. So when we're telling a good story, we have an emotional connection. And I think that's whenever we're talking about a brand, that's the thing we start with. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to engage that emotional response to a story. And people care more about how does it make me feel than what are my services and benefits and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, odd turn of phrase, we start with what we call emotional drivers. So it's like, what is the thing that people care about that we can talk about in this thing. So, for example, if you're doing a charity, right, we work with Shelter in the UK, and they've got specific target audiences, you know, sort of middle-aged men, millennial males, millennial females, and their key sort of donation comes from sort of 50-year-old urban women. But each one of those groups is going to be motivated by different things. So we tell a different story. We tell a story of Michael, who's a middle-aged man who lost his home. We tell a story of Lamara, who's a young single mum. You know, it's about finding that connection with people. So that's really easy when you're doing a charity. But what happens if you're making a widget? And it's like, how do I make an emotional connection with that? And you know, and there's some really good examples that no matter what you do, you can make an emotional connection. So it doesn't have to be, you know, the classic emotion like happy, sad, frightened. It can be fear of missing out. It can be wanting to do well at work. It can be laziness. It can be grit. You know, there's all sorts of things. And there's a great example that I can share afterwards. But there's this company who do e-invoicing software called Talia. And no disrespect to them, one of the dullest services ever. You know, I mean, they do electronic invoicing software, and they do this brilliant film where they go, if you enter invoices manually, you can get RSI, you can hurt your wrist. If you have to hurt your wrist, you have to have time off work. If you have time off work, the intern fills in. If your intern fills in, they do a better job than you. If they do a better job than you, they become your boss. Don't let the intern become your boss. And it's just really like this kind of playing on the fear that actually, you know, okay, I need to do something better so that I look better at work. And that's a great emotional driver for something that's really quite dull. And they do it in a really funny way. It's quite interesting because fear is an unusual emotion to deal with it. But if you do it in a funny way like that, there's always a way that we can do that. A lot of work at the moment is starting with, you know, the planet is facing lots of challenges or society is facing challenges. So you connect with people on a campaign level and then you can explain what you do. So that's the best way to start a story.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I firmly believe that. I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, one of the emotions I always try and attach when I'm thinking about stories like that is one that I think everyone knows, but often doesn't come up. Like you say, people think about emotion, or I have to be angry or happy, or it's not that base. I think one of the areas that I like to focus on is feeling understood. So I think that's an area that I sort of, it is effectively an emotion, right? As soon as you feel understood, it's like the endorphins kick in. I'm not a biologist. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it feels that way of like, oh, finally someone gets me. It's like it's a relief. You know, it's this, wow, this really connects. And I think if you can be the brand where people get that connection of, oh, finally someone gets me. Someone is explaining this in a way I understand it. They understand my problem. They're solving it for me. That's great. If you can do that, and that can apply to any product, that's an enormous emotional connection in my mind. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much every film we make starts with something along the, I mean, certainly brand films or B2B films is like, we understand you. We understand you've got this problem. We understand that's really horrible.
Yeah.
And we can fix that. And it's like, oh, wicked. They, like you say, they get me. And you might phrase that in lots of different ways. Like, are you looking to save money? Are you looking to save time or whatever? Yeah. But it starts by understanding what they care about and going in with, we've got a technology platform that does this and nobody cares about, but going in with, you're really stressed at work and this is like, we know it's mental at the moment and this will help. That's a really different, it's a really much better way into the issue. Yeah. So you're absolutely right.
It's benefits, right? It's, I mean, people are, and I mean this in a nice way, are inherently selfish, and they should be, right? Because we as humans are trying to stay alive. No one else is going to look after you. Yeah, it's in our DNA, right? It's not a horrible thing. It's like we want to look after ourselves, of course we do. So, we're interested in what you're going to do to help us. We're not interested in how much money you're going to make from selling us whatever you've built. Well done, congratulations. But how are you going to benefit me? So, I think that's really important. It takes you back to a completely separate point that we won't talk about today. But you're really understanding your customers, as that's where everything really comes from in marketing. And if you need to do research, if you need to dig into your analytics, if you need to be smart around understanding what's really going on with your customers, that's the only way you're going to get to being able to deliver that benefit. Because if you just assume what that benefit is and what that problem is, chances are, at least for a good chunk of the audience, you're going to be wrong. And it's not, your video's not going to work, and nor is anything else you do, by the way. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? That really is it.
Okay. Well, that's really good.
When we're talking about story, there's other sort of ways that I think that work with video. A little trick for anyone who's thinking of maybe communicating in any type of content, not just video, is like we have this thing called EFA, which is a structure which is called emotion, fact, and action. And it's just a really nice thing to have in your head, building on that thing we've just said. It's like, make the emotional connection, then get some facts in there, as few facts as you need without kind of like flagging it too much, but you're going to have to answer some questions. But then action, you drive into a specific landing page, a specific thing, not just a feeling. So it's always a useful little thing to have in the back of your head, is that EFA.
Yeah, that's a good model. I like that. It's absolutely the right way. And when I was saying earlier about connect the hook, you still got to explain what it is you're selling, and then you need a call to action. I think EFA is a really nice way of putting that. How do you think it differs? If we're trying to create this connectivity through some of these methods, how do you think it differs for different age groups? I mean, demographics are gonna differ enormously. Look at Gen Z, of course. That's a very different behavior to you and me in the way they consume video. But at the same time, we're still humans. We've still got the same emotional drivers. I mean, do you see any need to approach things differently depending on the sort of demographic you're targeting?
I'm trying to decide whether I think it's about the wrapping or the way you tell the story.
Yeah.
I think that's more of a creative question than a strategic one, right? So when you're talking strategically, I think it's about, like, it is always understanding problems, understanding solutions. But yes, absolutely. I think you're going to make content. If we're making content for a Gen Z and increasingly Gen A, which is like, I've been talking about Gen A so much this week, it's really frightening how old I feel. But it's like, we're going to make it in a different way, and they will absorb it in a different way. And it's a stylistic thing. Whereas a brand film that's going on Facebook to a 50-year-old male who likes cycling, they're going to be different. but I don't think you would necessarily tell the story in different ways. I think, if anything, maybe the younger audience can sniff out non-authentic content quicker.
Yeah, great.
And I think that's probably like, they'll sniff out bad acting. They'll sniff out, and the thing we're really aware of, like, you know, we've got a mixed gender creative team. We've got a moderately mixed age creative team, but they still start at 30 years old. It's like, how do we talk to a 16-year-old? It's like, well, for a start, you don't. You get a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old to talk to a 16-year-old. So it's like having at least someone on your team that's aware that, you know, you can't be cool by thinking you're cool. As soon as you think you're cool, you're not cool, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. I was giving a talk at a university last night, and I was going to throw in the word lit in there somewhere, and then I decided against it at the last second.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you do it in ironic, I'm well aware of my position as a middle-aged man thing, that's fine. Yeah, well, that's kind of
absolutely going to be.
Yeah.
Someone asked me what car I drove, but I can't even remember what word he used for car. I'd never even heard it before.
Oh,
so
wow.
Try and catch up with
I mean,
that
if
one.
I say anything youth in front of my kids, they just turn around and go, never say that again.
That's right.
They just flat, they just kill it dead.
Just do it to embarrass them. That's the main reason.
Yeah, definitely.
And they'll be doing it to their kids one day. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The principles are the same, right? You still got to take the same sort of approach to the journey. You still got to have the same emotional connections. But I think the authenticity piece is important. I've been talking about that for a long time. That we really are in the human age, and I think there's so much transparency now, being able to see what companies are really doing and who they really are, and you can easily do some serious damage as a consumer to a company if they're in any way being inauthentic through social media and reviews. And there's a lot of power in the hands of the consumer, but also a lot more alertness for the consumer of seeing through the crap. To be honest with you, back in 80s and before, maybe even 90s, but certainly 80s and before, brands could just say a lot of stuff and people would just follow them because you'd have no idea whether they're telling the truth or not. Nowadays, it's going to come out, right? One way or another, someone's going to spill the beans. It's going to get out on social media. It's very transparent. Politics, business, all of it, really transparent these days. So I think authenticity is important at every age, but absolutely at that young age. They're not going to stand for greenwashing, and that just is not going to be tolerated.
Yeah, we're talking
anymore.
about a lot now. And I think it's interesting that appearing authentic was what everyone was talking about 2 years ago. We need to appear authentic. Now it's like, oh shit, they're going to check. We need to be, we need to be genuinely, we don't just need to appear like we've got the right tone of voice. It's like, so we're doing a lot with large corporates on environmental things. And it's like the efforts that people are now going through to make sure that there's rigor in what we're doing. And it's a genuine benefit to the planet and to avoid hints of greenwashing. I think, and that's exactly what it should be, right? But
it should. And
if it's not your space, don't do it.
Yeah, I've been saying it for 10 years, at least 10 years. If you're going to have a set of values, then have those as your values. Don't just write some words on a bit of paper and tell them that those are your values. They've got to actually be your values. So if you're going to do something for the climate, do something for the climate. Don't just put out some social media posts about it. And if at the very least, because you're going to get caught if you don't. But ideally, actually, because you want to do something positive, right? Not just because of fear of getting caught. You talk about fear motivating people. Look, we're going to go off on a completely different tangent here. But look, I think that's been, for me, I think already been really, really insightful stuff. It's a fantastic area. The psychology of it's amazing. I think, you guys at Hurricane have got some fantastic techniques and methodology for how you approach video, and I know you do some incredible work for some amazing brands as well. So look, Jon, it's been amazing. We're going to have you back to talk about how you actually deliver this, right? So we've talked about how do you actually create a nice video, but that's great, that's really compelling. But how do you actually build that into a video strategy that you execute and deliver, and where do you deliver it? We're going to do that on another episode in the not too distant future.
Look forward to it. The fluffy stuff's nice, but it's like, how do we do this, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've got to have both.
Yeah.
You've got to have both, right? Yeah. How do we create something compelling, and then where do we put that, and what do we do with it, right? So I think we'll talk about that in a few weeks. But that's been amazing, Jon. Thanks so much for joining me today, and thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on another episode of For the Love of Marketing. Cheers.